Most investors think that negotiation is all about confidence and charm and saying the right thing at the right time. But there's one overlooked skill that makes or breaks rent-to-rent deals. No one's really talking about it. Without it, even your best offers will fall flat. But once you master it, landlords start taking you seriously, agents start listening, and doors start opening up. So in this video, I'm breaking down the number one negotiation skill you can bring to your rent-to-rent business. More importantly, how to action it quickly. It's the same shift that's helped our students close deal after deal without needing a decade in sales. If confidence is your goal, then this is the blueprint. When we work with new mentees that are struggling to get deals over the line, there's one aspect that crops up pretty much every single time. So let me show you what I mean by that. So first of all, we've got you, and you're doing an absolutely amazing job securing your research. Fantastic. You've even got your leads lined up. Absolutely great. You maybe even secured a viewing at this stage too. And then we've got this area right before the deal that I want to go into a little bit more detail about. And it's where stuff can go wrong. And where I've put this little star here, this is negotiation, okay? And the thing about the negotiation strategies it's where the deal falls out of bed most often. So I want to cover in this video is exactly what we've done with our mentees to make sure this didn't go wrong and make sure you can fix it on your viewings as well. Okay, great. So let's kick things off. First of all, with my piece around authority. Now, what's so key here is that both you and the landlord need to believe this. So you've got to build the right foundations. And for me, that absolutely starts with the setup. Now, the thing about the setup piece is there's a number of bits in here. The first of all is making sure you've got your limited company. And literally that is like the foundations of your building. That's your business. And it makes you visible on Companies House, and that will inspire confidence in you because you're a real entity, but also the landlord, they might go and search for you, right? So first of all, let's get real. The right SIT codes. We're not messing around here. It's Rent-to-Rent 2.0. Let's do it properly. Another aspect to think about within that setup is your website. Now, guys, it's 2025. What are you doing without a website? But I'm not just talking about a GoDaddy, click the template, press go. Guys, lead by example. And, we've got some of the best examples out there. If you want to ask, just let us know. It needs to be very, very good. And it needs to communicate your offer very, very well. And if you do that properly, then it will fight your corner when you're not there. And if you can get that to work, then organic leads can come your way, right? So the better it is, the better you'll do. So just make sure you tick this box, okay? Now, back to the authority piece. Really, really important to mention that you're gonna have to have the right contracts as well. And both physically, you need them, but also some knowledge around that. So let's just break that down quickly. Now, with contracts, there's a couple of aspects. First of all, I want to make sure that you guys have access to a management agreement, because without the management agreement, you can't work direct to vendor, you can't work with a landlord. And I don't mean some Mickey Mouse thing you got off Dave from Facebook. It's the legit thing. And when I say legit, we've spent tens of thousands of pounds with solicitors building our agreements to make sure that when we use them and when our mentees use them, that they know they're protected. And it really inspires confidence with landlords as well, because they know that we've done our due diligence, we've worked with professionals in the industry, and this is what's going to make sure that responsibilities of both parties are covered. So super important, guys, you get this right. But also when working with agents, consider you might also have a company-led agreement to contend with as well. So having a bit of knowledge and confidence regarding that too is really, really going to help. Remember, that's you speaking with authority. Now, final piece I want to talk about is going to be your tone. A lot of people miss this one, and I really, really don't know why. Guys, people want to work with people that they like, and the best way to do that is to achieve it with your tone. Obviously, how you present yourself matters too, but you want your positioning to be you're the expert and you're there to solve the problem. And you're only going to do that if you can have all this stuff in place so that you speak with the confidence you need. Now, by tone, I don't mean use jargon. That's just confusing, comes across weird. It's more about asking the right questions and making sure you've got answers prepared for a couple of things. So just make sure tone is ticking this box, okay? So next, guys, I want to cover questioning. And the reason this is a whole diagram of its own is because it's absolutely vital. It's so easy to get this bit wrong. So let me just preface this by saying, I want you to go layers deep on a number of aspects of this. So let's build it out. First of all, I need you to have 10 questions lined up, because you might be encountering a landlord, it might be an agent, it might be the brother, it might be the auntie, the uncle, it doesn't matter, but you're going to be visiting someone who's probably a decision maker. So get 10 questions lined up along the lines of, do you manage the property yourself? Have you had experience with tenants in the past? Have they been good? How have they been? How long have you had the property? Is there a mortgage in place? They're the sorts of questions I want you to be asking. So make sure you've got a bunch of questions lined up, ready to go. Now, importantly, asking questions is great, but more important is going 3 layers deep. And to go 3 layers deep, I want you to build out those questions so that instead of just saying, John, what about the tenants? And John says, yeah, they moved out. You go 1 layer deeper by saying, tenant moved out? What do you mean by that, John? At which point, it might divulge a little more about what the tenant's circumstance was. At which point, we find out a little more about why they moved out. Was it to do with management? Was it because they left the property in a tip? Who knows? But it's really important to go that layer deeper. And then finally, I want to know how that impacted the actual landlord. What impact did it have on him? Because it might have been that they were okay, but that doesn't mean that they were great. And we want to know whether we can offer that service to be great for them. Now, once we've asked these questions, I want you to consider about having your problem solving hat on, because not all landlords have problems, but they all have motivations. And the best way to go about that is to be thinking deeply about how you can solve the problem. Remember, there's lots of aspects to this business model. It might be that you're going to do SA. It might be that you're going to do HMO. It might be that you could even do some sort of social housing thing. But these are all solutions to problems. Of course, even there's a management aspect here too that you could include. So have a think about, as they're answering these questions, how you could put them into a category of a problem that could be solved. Now, I mentioned motivations just now, didn't I? Super important. Because although every landlord will have a motivation, it might be that once you've asked these 10 questions and you find that John absolutely loves managing the property and has had great tenants, I get asked a lot, well, how could I possibly offer something to solve for? And what's the motivation? Well, let me tell you, the landlord might absolutely love all the stuff he's doing, but would he rather be playing golf on a Wednesday as well as a Saturday? So trust me, there are places people would rather be. And if you can take that off their hands so they can get that guaranteed cash flow and they've got security in their property, so they'd rather be doing something else, that could well be the motivation you've been missing. So don't forget that one as well. Next up, we've got contracts, and just bear with me, okay? I know that might sound scary, and I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to tell you more about the negotiation strategy and what you need to know. So let's break it down simply. Contracts. Now, 3 aspects to this I want you to consider, and I'm going to use all the colours in my repertoire today because it's super important. Now, 3 things the landlord's going to want to know regarding your offer, how your business works, and what you can do for them is, first of all, the rent. And what I mean by that is simply the number that was on the OpenRent, Zoopla, Rightmove listing and how you found that number. Top tip, never mention that number first. Always get them to say that number to you. Helps with the negotiation later on, trust me. So you've got to know the rent, because unless you know the rent, you're not going to know if you've got the confidence to make the offer. So bear that in mind. Now, another thing I want you to add into this is, of course, the term. Now, we would usually say 3 to 5 years, opting more for a 5 rather than a 3. And on the back of that, the landlord's probably going to have been used to maybe a 12-month thing, the tenancy, or maybe like periodic tenancies are coming up as well. So you're going to have to know what term you're offering and whether that makes sense from a break-even perspective for you. Final piece. I'm going to call this covenants, but it's pretty much the responsibilities of you with regards to their property, but also them regarding their property. In the same way that you might be offering a level of cleaning and cosmetic refurb, for example, but the boiler would still be the landlord's responsibility. So it's that stuff that needs outlining here to make sure you get that right. So let's just quickly cover that again. So you need to know what's the dollar. You need to know the length of time. We want 3 to 5 years. And then finally, the responsibilities of who does, can't spell, what. Now, let me stress one more time now that knowing the rent, the term, and who's responsible for what is all about that negotiation and your confidence. You're offering a great value to this landlord, and they understand the service you bring to the table as well. That will help this deal get over the line. We're going to massage it there, trust me. So we've discussed the rent, the term, and the covenants in terms of that responsibility you bring to the table. Well, now we've got clarity on that in our heads, it's time to present that to the landlord. And we do that in terms of an offer. So what I want to do with this is let's draw it as a bit of a step ladder. And at the beginning, we've got some uncertainty, but we're going to build certainty as we go along because this is what the landlord's going to hear. And hopefully, get this right, you're one step closer to getting those keys. So first things first is, until now, you've probably been positioned as a tenant because you've reached out for a viewing. They might not actually know what you do. That's called the indirect approach. If you've been direct, then this would even happen sooner, which is great because it means they understand your business model. So if we've gone indirect, this is where you would segue into not being a tenant and offering your service. So the first thing they need to know is literally who you are. And I mean your business and your personal relationship to that. So you're probably the founder, the director, the MD, etc. So the first hurdle we need to jump over is who you are. And once you've communicated that, hi, my name's Guy, and I'm a relocation specialist. There you go. That's me, and that's the business that I operate inside of. At which point, they've still got no idea really what you bring to the table. So that's the next big piece. Is going to be, what do you do? So that's our next hurdle here. It's what you do. And what I mean by this is what service you would provide to the landlord. Well, I provide long-term accommodation solutions for my clients. You can be as specific as you need here, and we can talk about the specificity of clients on another video. But once they know what you do, you want to describe how that helps the landlord. So you've got this final step, which is the how. This is where you would offer some version of your guaranteed rent service, maybe your cosmetic refurb, maybe purchase options as well. So they know who you are and what your business is all about, what you do to deliver your service, and how you're going to help that landlord. And that's all going to loop back to the problem-solving hat we wore earlier and those questions that we asked, because that's all through the filter of those answers. Once you've achieved this, you're one step closer to getting those keys. And we've just got a couple other things to look at before we move to that stage. Now, it's so important you get this bit right and even rehearse this. Find someone to talk to and go back and forth on this bit, because if you get this right and it flows well, it's said with confidence, remember that tone I mentioned earlier, then this will land well with the landlord. The problems will be brought into sight, and with your setup in place, the confidence of that delivery, this is what's going to communicate how you solve that problem best. So you've told the landlord how you're going to solve their problem. You've got your tone right. You've told them the rent that you're going to be guaranteeing. You've told them the term over which you're going to be operating, and it's now their turn. So this is where questions are often asked. Now, I'm going to frame it in the context of objections, but they could just be questions. They could just be interested. But if we dig deeper, we'll generally find objections. So let's start there. Okay. So primarily, you're going to come across a number of categories. So listen really carefully, because this is where negotiation often goes wrong. And the first thing I want you to consider is whether or not the question leading to an objection is actually true. Okay? And what I mean by that is, I'm going to do a bit of a decision tree here. And what I mean by that is the landlord may be asking about who your clients are, but is that really what they mean by that question? So by going a couple of layers deeper, as we've done with our previous questioning, I want to ask questions like, what do you mean by that, John? And can you explain that a little deeper, John? And I want to get real clarity, because if you haven't found the actual problem or the actual objection, then you might be solving for the wrong thing. So the first question is, have you managed to find the right question that got asked? So if we're a no, we need to make sure that we ask the additional questions and make sure we found the actual problem, because it might be nothing to do with previous tenants. It might be nothing to do with the length of the term. It might be the certainty they need in loads of other areas. And you wouldn't know that without digging that extra layer deeper. Now, once you've done that, I want you to do what's called a bit of a tie down. So if we carry on the flow here, I want you to do what's called a tie down. So this is where, when the landlord says something along the lines of, who are your clients? And you realize it's because they're concerned about who's staying in their property, and you reassure them that they are young professionals, locum doctors, nurses, emergency accommodation, relocations, and that sits well. Then the next thing you want to do is to say, if that's the case, would we be moving ahead today? So that's called a tie down. And that means that they can't really object on that any further, because you've got a yes out of them. So if they are young professionals, if they are relocations, if they are this, they are that, would you be happy with that? Would we be moving forward today? And if the answer is yes, that's our tie down. So really, really important. You can do that with any questioning as well. If this is the case, would we be moving forwards today? Tone matters there too. So just be conscious. We're not trying to sideswipe them with this. We're just trying to find clarity in our offer. And finally, and I absolutely love this piece, and it's often forgotten about. I'll make a little bit more room here. And this is probably the number one thing that I see, and how deals fall out of bed is you're getting yes signs, you're getting buying signals throughout this process. And then the landlord still says yes, and they're interested. Even at this stage, you might even get a yes. Fantastic. And you leave the viewing and you never hear from them again. And it's because you made a mistake exactly along this arrow at this stage here. And that's because you didn't go for no. Go. Let's do it for no. Okay? Super important, guys. So this is where you're getting all those signals. They've said yes to the rent. They said yes to the term, yes to the business models, yes to the responsibilities. And you think you've got it in the bag. But before you leave, top tip, never leave without getting a phone number or an email address. You don't want to communicate through Open Rent. Top tip. But before you leave, you want to go for no. And what I mean by that is, instead of taking it at face value that the rent was fine, the term was fine, you want to go back to them and say, okay, John, so what happens next is, and you build the timeline for you sending contracts and speaking to them, which is for another video. But this is where you say, any concerns about anything else? You say, no, really clear. You say, are you sure, John? And then you give them an opportunity to talk about the stuff that's not talked about. The rent, is that it? You're okay with the 2,300 monthly for the 5-year term? Is the term at 5 years? Literally say those words to them, because that's where the real objection might come from. You might not have seen it yet. Okay, and that's why this part of the negotiation is so key. So you want to go for no, put yourself out there and say, John, honestly, is there anything else that we've not covered that you're unsure about? Anything about the cleaning, my clients? You mentioned a few bits earlier. And that's where you've pulled the thread, and that's where that final piece that's going to stop them ghosting you here can be covered. And if you solve that, then you're set up to take those keys as soon as contracts are exchanged, which will happen shortly after. So again, guys, just to stress, you want to make sure that any objections mentioned are actually the truth. Ask what they mean by that. Can you give me some clarity around what you mean? Those sorts of questions. At which point, we need to make sure our tone's aligned so we can do a bit of a tie down. Great, John. So if I was able to do that for you, would we be moving forward today? Really, really powerful tie down. Again, you can use that with any area of questioning. And then finally, don't be afraid to go back in and ask for more. Because if you don't, you'll get ghosted at the final post. And that was that star I draw in the original diagram where it falls out of bed. So just make sure you do these 3 things the next time you're at that final stage of that viewing and saying yes to that deal.